Hola. Hello. I appreciate you for being here for a reading from the Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers. Thank you for joining me as we continue with Chapter 26. Chapter 26 is titled E-Communities. How in HBCU research practice partnerships, community cultural wealth, galvanize minoritized students' access to STEM spaces. By Professor Deena Khalil at Howard University. By Professor Angel Miles Nash at Chapman University. By Professor Adrian Wayne Bruce at Howard University. By Professor Joanna Sanchez at Excelencia in Education. And by Professor Meredith Kier at William and Mary. Thank you, professors, for Chapter 26. Thanks to you, we can continue looking towards page 352 from the Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers. Excuse me, real quick. It's like looking at page 300. Excuse me again. Looking at page 352. First, I invite you to kick back and relax. As we continue with more from the Handbook. Next section from Chapter 26. Methodology. Through intentional redesign, e-communities focused on increasing minoritized teachers and students' interest in STEM careers by relating mathematical slash science concepts and practices to culturally responsive engineering opportunities. It's cited from Khalil and Kier in 2017, 2018. Kier and Khalil, 2018. The problem of practice identified in our research practice partnerships was how to attend, quote, to equity and transformative language as both a process and outcome, unquote. Cited from Mendoza and more in 2018. For 3 years, we, STEM professionals, and a team of HBCU and other university mathematicians, science, and engineering teacher educators, in collaboration with district and school leaders, identified middle schools whose teachers were interested in joining a research practice partnership to incorporate interdisciplinary, inclusive tasks that embody the math and science standards of practice. Drawing on the larger studies mixed methods. This chapter explores how community cultural wealth was shared among stakeholders and how these cultural resources served as pedagogical tools to support minoritized teachers and students' engagement in STEM concepts and practices, ultimately providing greater access to STEM spaces. Given the critical design of our HBCU research practice partnership, stakeholders prioritize the experience of minoritized students and social injustices within the community as epistemological resources when co-planning lessons that integrated an iterative design thinking process into culturally relevant engineering design tasks, as cited from Kier and Khalil in 2018. For teachers to embark on the complex task of designing and implementing lessons intended to promote interdisciplinary STEM practices, they first had to develop an appreciation of design thinking as a practice that could support teaching and learning where empathy was mutualistic. In contrast, we as researchers appreciated the opportunity to understand the complexity of teaching engineering within the changing nature of teachers' numerous responsibilities. As cited from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, 2020. So that we can better understand designing culturally relevant solutions to community-based STEM problems. Educators and STEM professionals iteratively co-designed and revised engineering design tasks in 8 face-to-face full-day workshops and monthly virtual meetings. We integrated STEM professionals' personal and professional inspirations and students' lived experiences into lessons to design engineering tasks in culturally specific ways. Cited from Gay, 2010, Leonard, 2008. That counter anti-Black bias and affirm their STEM identity. Virtual meetings between STEM classes and STEM professionals of color were then scheduled to offer minoritized students a chance to discuss their prototypes to the teaching engineering design tasks and to ask the STEM professionals about their academic and career paths. Next, subsection, participants. This chapter draws from the conversations and reflections between stakeholders participating in the 3-year of the Research Practice Partnership. We recruited 40 educators, teachers, and school leaders, many of whom have attended or are currently attending an HBCU across 3 middle school grade levels. For example, 6th through 8th, for 4 geographically proximal and demographically similar schools that predominantly serve minoritized students. In the third year, we also recruited 7 volunteer STEM professionals from local government agencies and businesses. Table 1 provides a profile of the educators and STEM professionals of color in this chapter. All of the research participants and research schools were given pseudonyms to protect their identities and anonymize the information they provided in the subsequent section. Next subsection: data sources and analysis. To develop an understanding of how community cultural wealth pedagogy supported minoritized teachers and STEM professionals in bridging STEM concepts and practices to middle school mathematics and science content, we designed and implemented in research practice partnership that provided several data sources. First, we recorded the dialogue between teachers and STEM professionals as they brainstormed lesson ideas during face-to-face meetings and a blend of synchronous and asynchronous virtual collaborations. These audio and video recordings were augmented by observations and field notes taken during collaborative co-planning sessions. We also reviewed online discussion boards and teacher reflections after implementing lessons and conducted 8 focus groups that ranged between 1 to 3 hours. The focus groups explored the stakeholders' perceptions of the research practice partnerships connection to the curriculum planning, community building, racialized learning spaces, minoritized identities, social justice topics, and the advantages and limitations of the research justice practice partnerships community of practice. Through 62 recorded and transcribed sessions, the dialogue among teachers, STEM professionals, and other research practice partnership stakeholders reflected distinctive forms of community cultural wealth. Data analysis indicated that the pedagogical dimensions of community cultural wealth were especially evident in the 16 recorded and transcribed Zoom sections between STEM professionals and minoritized students in middle school math and science classrooms. We transcribed all audio and video recordings and engaged in open coding of the data guided by the categories of community cultural wealth. Using Desus, a cross-platform, web-based, qualitative research analysis application. Our open coding led to Axle coding to explore how teachers and professionals use use of community cultural wealth related to supporting access to STEM spaces, focusing on the analysis on analysis focusing on analyzing these interactions meant paying attention to the in the moment construction of an interaction and how community cultural wealth supported or mediated stakeholders' knowledge creation processes. Cited from Jordan and Henderson in 1995. We used analytical modes during analysis to compare how broadly and knowledgeably participants spoke about their content areas, how they articulated links between concepts, and how they made connections back to minoritized students' interests. These modes were compared to the final thematical analysis and their relative strengths as epistemological resources for community cultural wealth outputs were evaluated. In total, analysis of the qualitative data obtained from the interactions between stakeholders and their reflections revealed 477 separate instances where the dialogue of educators and STEM professionals elucidated various forms of community of cultural capital. In total, analysis of the qualitative data obtained from the interactions between stakeholders and their reflections revealed 477 separate instances where the dialogue of educators and STEM professionals elucidated various forms of cultural capital. All 6 forms of capital were identified in the analysis, and many overlaps between the capitals as they are not, quote, mutually exclusive or static, unquote. Cited from Yoso in 2005, page 77. Table 2 provides a summary for each of the individual capital frequencies, in parentheses, as well as their cross-coded preferences. Table 2 provides a summary for each of the individual capital frequencies, as well as their cross-coded frequencies. There we go. We're pausing here. Thank you for joining me today for this reading from the Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers. I wish you all a good day. And a thanks to the professors. Thank you, professors. Thanks to you all, we were able to read this today from chapter 26, E-Communities, How in HBCU research practice partnerships, community cultural wealth galvanize minoritized students' access to STEM spaces. By Professor Deena Khalil at Howard University. By Professor Angel Miles Nash at Chapman University. By Professor Adrian Wayne Bruce at Howard University. By Professor Joanna Sanchez at Excelencia in Education. And by Professor Meredith Kier at William and Mary. Thank you, professors. Thanks to you all, we may look forward to continuing with more from the Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers. Page 353 is what we can look forward to continuing with next time. And the section, drumroll, insights into stakeholders' community cultural wealth. Okay. We can look forward to this section from chapter 26 and more from the handbook next time. Until then, I wish you a good day.